Hello, good evening, good morning, good arvo, good AM, wherever you may be. For those that don't know me, Samantha O'Rourke, Diamond of Divinity is my special business page. I've decided to, after talking to so many different people, not only on my podcast, but privately and with friends and things like that, about a lot of their own experiences to do with extraterrestrials, commonly known as UFOs, and I like to call them star people because I think that's a little bit nicer. I think the other terminology, even though we do use it because it's how we communicate the idea, I just find sometimes it's a bit harsh. It's got a bit of a not so nice history, those words, and they can be used a bit incorrectly. So UFO, extraterrestrial, star people, as I like to call them out of respect. Um, and after listening to other people's stories, I've found that I myself have had the need to speak up and share my own. Now, it's taken me probably, well, I'm sure all my life, but at least the last 22 basic years to have the balls to even talk about it to people I know. And pretty much all my experiences, except for one, but then I've had to rethink that as well, have been pretty awesome, mind blowing, amazing, still are ongoing. And I thought to myself, now you've asked everybody else about their experiences being either spiritual or non-spiritual, doesn't matter what their belief system was. Everybody in the world at some stage has had some sort of either physical, holographic, or communication with those off-world. And and I said to myself, "Girl, you've had so many yourself. I think it's time that you let other people know about it." And as I said, it takes a lot for anyone who's had any contact whatsoever. If it's positive contact, it's more exciting, it's easier, so people talk about it more openly. But if it's contact you're not sure about, and you've had like either uncomfortable or frightening or undiscerning an idea of what that was experience, well then they're a little harder to talk about because there's a lot of judgment behind it and there's a lot of fear and some people don't want to share that piece of their life because they're worried about ridicule, but they're also worried about how it affects them personally, their family, their friends, etc. And because of the work I do, for those that don't know me, I'm a universal channel. That's what I call myself. And the reason I call myself that is because I have an ability to traverse the universe and pretty much go anywhere and talk to as many races as want to make contact, of course. But part of my intuitive ability, I have gifts that can do just about anything per se, within reason, of course. I'm not, not perfect. So I was thinking about that the last couple of days, and because some of the experiences that I'm going through even now, which are becoming more physical, I thought perhaps why not get out there and show your ears and talk about it. And the reason that I've got other people that have come on this podcast over time, and there'll be more in the future, I'm sure. So if you're interested and you've had any extraterrestrial experiences, contact me via Facebook Messenger. I'll get back to you within 24 hours. I do screen everybody because I've had one or two that have come through that I'm like, I can't share that. That will offend people, or it's yeah, they just weren't right. So you will get a little screening from me because I don't want to bring anyone in that's going to cause any disruption per se. So because I've got to be careful of people's emotions and how they feel about things, and even my own experiences. If because there is one there that's a little different that I will only go so far with. I think maybe we'll see. So come and make contact. And it doesn't matter if you haven't had any physical or holographic or some sort of experience with extraterrestrials. Even your spiritual journey, if you've had a concept or personal experiences, or who are you, how did you become who you are today, a little personal journey, message me and I'm more than happy to have a look at what your story may be. Just give me a really brief idea of who you are and what you wish to communicate and talk about or share, and I will decide from there if it's correct for this podcast. Simple as that. So you don't have to be spiritual. You can be of any denomination, any belief system. I'm pretty open to a point on people's experiences. I don't see it as a either spiritual, religious, or some sort of denomination idea. I just see it as people have had certain experiences, and they are more than willing to, if they wish to share that, then I'm open to that concept of who are they and are they right. So, alrighty. So, um, I will probably do this in maybe a couple of different recordings because it depends how long I go on for. I may break it down into 2 or something like that, or 3 even. Um, my first experience. Now, all my life, I've been totally different. I know I'm different. I'm special in that way. I literally have been someone who has had a couple of out of body experiences when I was younger. I wasn't a sickly child, thank goodness, but I was like most children. I went through things like tonsillitis and all that jazz. And in my era, for those that don't know, I don't have any problem with age. I'm nearly 60, so in that era, it was normal to it was the tonsillitis era, I call it, and then the era recently was the gallbladder era, so they just took stuff out, right? So I went through that stage, but I realized when I look back now with someone who's awakened and sees things and understands what they're seeing, I knew that I was having a couple of out of body experiences, but I didn't realize back then that's what it was. And I used to feel things. Didn't know that I was awakened. I didn't know that I was gifted. I didn't know any of those fancy words. I was just a normal person trudging through life. Um, for those that do know me, they're probably going to laugh because they want to like you bull. But I'm actually a very shy, introverted, hermit type person. I have been my whole life. I spend a lot of time on my own, but I spend a lot of time observing humanity and the growth of not only myself but those around me and the whole consciousness of this planet. So that was all my learning stages. So, but at that time, I didn't know that that's what it meant. I just thought there was like I didn't even know. I couldn't even say, was I weird? Was I unstable? I don't know. Um, so I just trudged along, and I used to have this. I used to have struggle with. I could feel every damn thing too much. So I could feel people. I could hear their thoughts. I could pick up bits and pieces. I'm very good with psychology and body language. It's just a natural instinct I have as well. So that's a part of it. But the rest of it, I was hearing, or I was just seeing odd things all the time, all through my life till about the age of 28, and I didn't know what it was. I knew about psychics. I had once gone to a is it I went to 2 actually when I was younger. I was dragged along, I didn't wanna go. One lady was a tea leaf reader, but she was, older woman, so she would have been probably my age now or something, and she was pretty good, like but she was old school. So when she did hers, her tea leaf reading idea was just more her, genetic lineage, so it was in the blood that they all did it, so all the women did that, and that was her tool at the time, and I remember going to her and her I can't remember what she told me now, it's too long ago because I was like, oh, yeah, I think I was probably 18 or something like that, I was young, so I, um, I don't remember what she said, but I just remember the experience being mind-blowing a bit, and she said some things to me that I remember feeling and thinking, "Me? Really?" That I didn't take it on well, so I just sort of brushed it off, and then I went to another gentleman. He was English, and for those who don't know, I'm not Australian. I'm in Australia, but I was born in New Zealand, so I'm a Kiwi, and land of the long white cloud, and I went to this gentleman, I was dragged along there too, and he was an unusual looking man. I can't even remember his name, too long ago, but he was worldwide known at that time, and he had come to New Zealand to retire and just not really do much anymore, but he was open to do word of mouth. So if a friend of a friend wanted to go and see him, he was happy to do that. And he had a companion because he was partially blind and he had a few issues with his health at that stage. So he spoke of things, told me of things, and at that time it was like, there's no way that's going to be me, and there's no way that that's where I'm going to be heading, because as far as I was concerned, I was never leaving my country for any reason or whatsoever. And he told me that he saw me doing big things, and then he saw me traveling around. He had a name of a highway that I'd never heard of. I found it eventually. It's here in Australia. It was a highway of Australia, one of the highways that I actually travelled to get to where I am. And he was very good and very clear at what he did. And he said, I have a lot going on around me. In other words, there's a lot of people with me, and I have a lot of energy, and blah, 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 all that stuff. So he was unusual, man. He was probably one of the more deeper channels I'd ever met at that stage in my life. And like I said, I knew too. And he was really different. He didn't do reading per se. He was a channel. And now I look back, I look at the fact that he himself was channeling like I'm doing. And he was trying to express to a young woman who wasn't really sure what the frig he was talking about that she was. And I just shrugged my shoulders. I didn't know what to say to him, and he was 100% correct. Everything that he saw, right down to where I was going to travel to get to where I am now, was identical. He was 100% correct. So I look back on all these little stories, and I realized I had a lot of meetings and unusual experiences that I just didn't know what they were. I wasn't around. I have a step family who was Maori, so there I have a Indigenous connection, not through blood, but through relation. Um, and they live in a actual official marae or marae or whatever they call it. I don't know how to say it properly now. Um, and they were very deeply spiritual, and they were very empathic. They were channels, they were psychics, they were healers. They were extremely of the land, and they lived in an official environment. So it was actually true Maori traditional. And I met them a couple of times, and they wanted me to come and spend time with them. And of course, I wasn't allowed to, but I was only like, God, it was probably 10 or 11 or 12 or something like that. I was very young, very, very, like probably even 10. I wasn't I wasn't old enough to understand what the heck they were talking about. And they told my family, they said, there's something special about her. She needs time with us to adjust to who she is and why she's here. And we'd like to bring her in to sit with usually it was the woman, the Maori woman, to come and sit with them because they're the ones that were the channels. They're the ones that would bring in like Divine Mother and their own ancestral connections and bloodline lineages, and they would channel. So I wasn't allowed to do that. I won't say why because it's not fair on my family if I go down that rabbit hole. But it was a no. But then they begged. They actually said, "Please, if it's just give us half a day with her. She needs help. She needs to adjust who she is, and we're telling you now there's something different about her." Now they had recognised that my whole bloodline, including cousins, distant cousins, all of the extension of. Out of all the children, grandchildren otherwise, I stood out. I was completely different to every single part of my bloodline. And they knew it, and they just wanted to help me to understand that I was a channel and that I was having contact with things, and I wasn't able to. So I just accepted that because I didn't know any different. So that was the first stage of my life where things were weird. People were seeing things about me that I didn't understand. And even in my teenage years, I was very lost. I was alone. I just didn't relate to normal everyday things. So I was born very, very different. I was born wide awake, basically. And I had this inner knowing in me as for as long as I can remember, even when I was younger, that I was here, but I wasn't human per se. And I know that sounds strange from a kid, but I didn't relate to the human side of myself very well. I just knew there was something else, and I was here for a specific reason, just didn't know what the reason was at that time. So I myself, when I look back on some of my experiences and some of the things that I went through, which I won't have time for all in one recording, but even when I was young and you know, you have your first boyfriend and you hang out with your friends, you do all that jazz. We had some very unusual experiences up what was called the Wanganui River, I'll get it out, in New Zealand, which is on in Taranaki area, just below. And we had gone up there, and up there is also very traditional. So there's a marae up there. There's a lot of the elderly or traditional Maori. I don't know about now, but back then they were still living there. They were still a community, and they just come back and forth basically, but lived out there. And I remember this was probably my first extraterrestrial experience, and I was just I had a little red Mini. It was fast and it was zippy. That's typical Mamantha. She's got a lead foot. And I we went up out of town. Back in those days, the highways were small. We had a lot of gravel dirt roads, and where I lived was very mountainous and very beautiful, and it followed the river. So I used to go driveys up there, and that was part of our, getting away from everything. And we had a very strange experience. Now, we'd been driving around and we were coming through another area and we thought we'll go all the way up to the marae and go and see if anyone's there and blah, blah, blah. So we got part the way, and these were people, the people I was with. So they were very physical people. They weren't awakened. They were just average people doing their thing, young, into motorbikes, into cars, and it was very norm. And so none of them would make up a story or even believe anything like that in if you told them to. Probably to this very day, they would just go, "No, rubbish." So for them to have the experience with me, and now I look back, it was me. I didn't know at the time, but to have that experience with me, um, to be with people who are normal and physical, then it was proof, right? But at the time, we didn't know what to do with it. It sort of frightened us a little bit. Not that anything went wrong per se, but it was just weird. So we were just coming around a bend somewhere on a dirt gravel road. It was beautiful out there. If anyone that knows New Zealand just knows, it's glorious. I actually wish I was still there, but I had a purpose here in Australia. So as we were coming through, I'll give you the quickest version I can. We were traveling, and we heard this very weird noise. Now, for anyone that's been bush or been in the forest, your mind can play tricks with you because what happens out in those areas, it echoes. So bird sounds, airplanes, trees falling, unusual things like that. When that happens out there, it's so quiet that you think you're hearing things. And it's not uncommon for people that have got lost like in Australia, even in the bush, they hear things. Quite often you can hear distant traffic, even though there's no traffic for miles. It just runs through the ground, through the forestry or through the bush, and it echoes and makes weird noises. And we knew that. We were used to that because I lived in that place for so long. So we heard this very unusual rumble sound, and we're just like, maybe they're doing some roadwork somewhere, or there's something going on, like a farmer, and we just ignored it. But then it got really, really loud, like super loud, and we're like, that's too loud. We're at the middle of nowhere. We are literally under the stars. That's how far out of town we were. We were like a couple of hours out of town, like deep in the forest. And we're like, what the heck is that? So we stopped the car and it stopped. And we're like, nah, it just must be noise coming, echoing through the forest. Don't worry about it. Went a little further, just only like 2 minutes actually it was. And we heard it again. And we're like, what the actual nuts is that? And we stopped and we listened, and the car was still running, and we're like, "That's so loud. What is that?" And it was a very unusual, deep rumbling sound. It was something that I don't even put how to explain that noise. It was unusual. And then we felt this really weird, and back then none of us were into energy, right? So we were just kids. We felt this really, like, the hairs on your body stood up, and we felt this weird energy run through the car, through our bodies, and we're like, "Nah, no, it can't be." We didn't even think of UFO because we didn't know what that meant. And next we heard this really, not only did it start to rumble, we heard this very strange whipping noise. So it's like a noise come in, like, for those that understand energy and frequency now, it's like the energy built up and let go. And as it let go, instead of it going boom, it made a whipping noise like and it was super loud. Like I still get goosebumps just saying that. And we're like, what the? That stopped us in our tracks. And we're like, so we looked around, there's nobody for miles, and I mean like kilometers, whatever you want to call it. No, there's nothing. Like we're in there's not even housing, there's not even people where we were. And it was such dense forestry that we realized it can't even be farmers because it's too dense. And it was all hilly and mountainy. So there's no one could even do land or farm there. That's how dense it was. So we pulled over, and as we pulled over, the car jolted to the right, and it was like it's like when someone who has an impact and it pushes the car a bit. We had that sensation. We're like, and of course, my other half was driving, and he's like, "What the?" And he's holding the steering wheel, and he's like, "I can't hold the steering wheel." And we're like, "Don't be stupid." And we thought he was being an idiot. We're like, "Don't be stupid." And he's like, I'm not kidding. He said, "I'm going to pull off the side of the road." So he pulls off, handbrakes, and as we pulled in, we heard the noise again. Now, because it's so dense, you couldn't even really look up to see because you wouldn't have seen much but trees, so you wouldn't have seen the whole sky. And we heard this weird noise again. Then the whipping sound was multiple times, so it was about 3 or 4 times. And then we felt the car jolt, and we jumped out. We jumped out of the car. The car was not on. It was the handbrake was on, so no one could, fake it. And we were a little bit shaky, and we're like, and as we got out of the car, we heard, which is impossible because of the density of the forest, we heard multiple somethings running through. And we're like, because we like kids were like, "I hope it's not an axe murderer." We were trying to make jokes because we were a bit afraid. And we all looked at each other and laughed a bit because, when you're unsure or a bit afraid, you giggle as kids, and you're like, and we went silent, and we're like, and then all went dead quiet. Like the whole place went dead quiet. No birds, no nothing. And we're like, we're leaving. So we left, and we never really spoke about it because it's not something that, when you're a teenager, it's not really something that you sort of go, unless you are that person who's interested, that you go, I don't know. I don't know what the shit just happened here. So we left it at that and carried on as normal. We mentioned one or two things, but we never really went into it again because what do you do? What do you do with that? How do you sit around with a group of people and say, "Oh, by the way, I think we had a UFO experience," when they don't want to talk about it? So it was just left and brushed under the carpet, and then I moved on, never saw them. So that was my first unusual, besides a couple of out of body things, that was my first really strange, like, we had physical movement in that vehicle that was stationary, turned off, handbrake on. We double checked to make sure that one of us wasn't playing a game or playing a joke because, boys like to joke girls when they like them. They like to play games because they like them, like pulling here, all that jazz. So we went back and looked at the car. Nope, no key in the ignition. She's in park, handbrake on, all that jazz, motor not running. So we're like, and the bit that frightened us, this is the bit that has been hard for me to talk about, is that right in front of the vehicle, there was a drop in the forestry. So there was like, because being a river area, there's little river inlets that went in, the dense forest, and we looked down, there was a bit of a drop, and we realized the car was millimeters away from going down into. So it was like they almost went, "Oh, sorry, we didn't mean to do that. We'll just pull you up here so that you're safe." It was very strange. So that was my first. My second big one, I got nothing for years. My second big one was, not I've had some fantastic experiences, don't get me wrong. These are only the 2 that I had that were a bit strange. I've had lots of wonderful things, which I'll talk about later, that are still happening to even a week ago. So my second one was, it's about 22 years ago, I think, roughly. God, it could even be a bit longer. I lose time. I had come back to where I am now. I haven't been here long, so say a year or 2, maybe. I think it was. And I was lying in. I'd had to lie down in bed. So this one happened for me physically, but I'll explain. It was like an OBE experience where I was in body, but out of my consciousness was out of the body. So I'd separated. So I was laying there and I knew I'd had a deep sleep, and I was awoken by a feeling of something. I don't know if it was something in the room or just being an empath. By then I was a bit of aware. So this is around the age of 28 to 30 something, where I was beginning to be aware that I had an ability, and I was working then. So I was doing readings and massage and healing and things like that. So I'd already started to wake up a little bit. But I had a lie down, and in that moment, I realized that I was very, very deep asleep, and I knew nothing about OBEs or near-death experiences. I know a little bit about near-death, I have to say, but not OBE. And I was laying there, and I realized I was in a sleep paralysis, which is one of the first stages of when you can consciously shift out of your body. Those that understand or know of out-of-body experience, one of your first stages will be sleep paralysis before you can then your soul will step out and hop out of the body. So I was in between state, and I felt nothing. So I felt like I was floaty, and which is normal for sleep paralysis or OBEs. So I felt floaty, and then I had this weird feeling on my body, like energy, which is I now know as frequency, was running through me. And I laid there, and I thought, what's going on? So as I've consciously come out a bit more, so I was fully awake. I can tell you now, it was not a dream state. I know the difference because of the work I do. I was fully awake in this moment. I came out, and I don't know if I'd sat up. I didn't feel like I'd sat up at that point, but I was somewhere, and I was fully conscious, and as I looked, I saw these beings walking through my wall, and for those that know me know that I'm not lying, hand on heart, this really happened for me. Um, they came through, they walked into the house on my left-hand side, just in front, and there was like a handful of them, so there wasn't one or two, there was quite a few of them. And I didn't know much about certain things back then, but I was aware of some species, but not like I am today. I got full awareness. And some of them were slightly tall, some were a little smaller, a little shorter. And they, for those that know greys and things like that, they were kind of like that, but not. So their skin was smoother. And there's a couple of taller ones, like 2, and then the rest were smaller. I I I feel that the taller ones are a medical team of some sort because of what I've seen to this day. So and they were sort of a lighter skin, not really grey, so I don't feel to this day they were greys. But they came in, and there's a whole story that's behind this. So this is where it gets weird, but there's a reason behind it, eventually, that I figured out only this week, um, of what they actually did for me in the end. So, obviously, for those that know about extraterrestrial contact and things like that, there is a program that a lot of people have agreed to, a contractual hybrid program. Not all it's negative and dark like everyone talks about. There's a lot of programs and a lot of species like this. I feel like they were, um, so they could have been like a Syrian, maybe a cross species. I don't know. I've never gone back and looked at it honestly. Um, that we've agreed to share our genetic programming or our genetic cells for them to re-evolve back into a better or more conscious species. So some of them, like some of, as people know, I won't go too deep in it, but a lot of the greys and all that are robotics. So they don't have a soul. So they're just programmed under instruction. These guys were a lot more nefarious. They were a lot softer, and but their understanding of humanity was, I think, was missing a little bit of our emotional state and things like that. So obviously we're teaching them something, and obviously at that time, I haven't now. I've ended that contract straight away, pretty much when it was all finished. But they came to me to pretty much for children. That's basically what it is. I know I've got children somewhere else for sure. How many? I've never bothered to look, to tell the truth, but I just know this was a series of events that happened for me to do with a birthing, and for me to, uh, and this is getting out of the box, not sorry, but of supplying or giving them hybrid children so that they can evolve and grow. And there's a lot of hybrid species that have come from humanity. Look at Sasani. You've got, some of the Syrian consciousnesses have had that. Not all of them. The Greys, obviously, and things. And at that time, because I didn't really understand what was going on, I had a bit of a fear of all that. So when they came in, as I was lying there, I could physically feel them touching me. So this is my very first true physical experience, I must say, of an actual being here, like physically in my home, communicating with. And they um, they came into my body. They actually physically did. medical procedure. I could feel everything. For those that don't know me, I have a very strange ability. Even in my dream state or out of body experience, things like that, I feel everything at nighttime. Not always, but every so often, here and there, I'll have physical experiences at night, even in my dreams, where if I have an experience or if I even just have a dream state, depends on what it is, and I even have it for other people, which is a bit unusual, I will feel everything. So in this experience, I was literally physically feeling everything. So I could feel them. They had obviously created something within my body, and it was time for that to leave the body and be taken. So I could feel them. I could feel the pressure in my body. I could feel the pressure in my womb. I could feel the pressure in my stomach. It was like being under surgery without any anesthetic. The only thing they did do was to kind of help me get through it, because a lot of these species, they don't understand, like I said, emotionally, especially even the greys, some of the greys, they don't understand that we are affected by that experience. So I remember them looking at each other when I started to react, and the first reaction was fear because I'd never had this before. So I said to them, I'm terrified. And I said to them, I can feel everything you're doing. And they were looked at each other and went, oh, we didn't realize she could feel that much. So there was like, they didn't speak to me. I just knew. So it was a telepathic feeling that they were giving. And as they started to extract and pull, obviously a child or a beginning of a birth out of my physical body, I could feel every damn thing. So I said to him, please, I can feel that. Stop. It's too much. And again, it was like going through surgery with no medicine, no medication. So you can imagine what that's like people waking up in surgery, that sort of stuff. So it got to the point where the pressure in my body as they were extracting was so intense that I had to ask them to eliminate it, because I said that I can't take any more of that. So they looked at each other, they had some sort of conversation, and then they laid me into a peaceful state while they continued. And at that time, I was a bit confused. I was like, "What the heck?" The first thing I thought, "Have I lost my mind? Am I crazy?" Um, but I know I'm not, and many people might disagree. But it was real for me, and I could even feel them working even after that. I could feel them working on the ovaries and the womb. They were doing something there, but I'll tell you eventually what they were doing. I didn't know at the time what they were doing, but they were medically doing some things to help me. So um, once they'd finished doing that, and I could still feel the pressure. So if you can imagine pulling a child out of you, I've never had children, but I can imagine what that's like now. But but as they were pulling, I could still feel the pressure, and it was like, look, it was a feeling that there are no words for, to be honest. It's mind blowing. But the pain had gone. So that was something. And I didn't see what they'd done after that. I didn't see what they did with. I just know that they were doing their best to do what was required that I had agreed to at that time, and then take it from there. So by the end of it, as they were surgically cleaning me up and finishing, I said to them, "What's going on? What's this for? Why have I had to physically go through that?" And they just sent me a very loving feeling. They weren't menacing, even though it felt so real and so physical, bit traumatic in that aspect. There was no malice behind it. That was what I realized. So once I realized they weren't harming per se, we were just finishing a contract together. I was able to handle it a little bit better. So they went through my whole body. They checked everything. So again, they didn't just do that. They made sure that everything was right. So they didn't leave me damaged per se. Um, and they checked every aspect. So they checked everything inside, and they did downstairs, upstairs. They did it all. And then they looked at me, and I just remember looking at them with absolute confusion because I had never had that before, didn't know who they were. And then they just left. And I remember as I came out of it, I realized I was bloody awake, and I was like, shit, I'm awake. I didn't know I was awake. And I just laid there for a while, and I felt my body. I was, am I in pain? Is it no, nothing going on there? And they checked further. No, nothing. There was no markings. There was no evidence. So I couldn't exactly prove it. I can only give you what I know, what I went through. And um, and I didn't know what the hell, like, really, what the heck? Is everyone going through that? Like, obviously, there's others. Um, so I was obviously part of the hybrid program for children. And a friend of mine just said the other day, which was really lovely of him, that he said something that actually helped heal the last of that for me, because I've always been a bit confused about it. And he said, a lot of us, if you think about it, have agreed to contracts for many reasons. So children, assisting other planets, assisting other species. Um, it- we have done that out of an act of compassion and grace and kindness for their species, that they need our help. So for us to assist them like that is an act of grace. So it's not all nefarious and all bad. We have literally given a piece of ourselves, and we're probably from there at some stage anyway. We probably are them, or have had an incarnation with them. So really all we're doing is helping our own kind sometimes. But there are a lot of stuff like the Greys and some of those others that we won't talk about, that do stuff that's, I don't know if it is contracted. I think some of it's just nefarious. You know what I mean? It's not nice. So I didn't have that, thank Christ, but it was enough to freak me out a little bit. So I thought about that only recently, of after, hi David Starr, after David had spoken about some of the contractual programs to do with hybrid children, etc. That really, it did honestly took the last of the fear that I had about it out of me immediately. So it healed it immediately. Thank you, David. That I realized that obviously, because of the contact that I have with many extraterrestrials now, that part of my mission here was to assist others in other ways, and realizing that they themselves will then have a new evolved species that is full of love and compassion as well, and that they will evolve into a better place. Couldn't ask for anything better than that, can you? So it is a gift for others. So that was that. And then I realized after, like I said, only just recently, that at that time, for those that don't know, in that period that this happened, that same year, I was diagnosed with cancer. So they had diagnosed me with T-cell lymphoma. I was not given a good diagnosis. I had crossed into 2 different variants of some sort, trust me to be different, and they'd explained to me that this was going to be hell. It was going to be a war for me. And I was like, nah, stuff that. You know what I mean? So I went in for 1 treatment. I thought I had 2, but I can't bloody remember because I was under so much pressure back then, so much stress. I was very, very sick girl. In that period of time, I'd realized that my energy had literally gone to nothing. I had literally drained myself out, and I think a lot of it was stress related. I won't go into that side of it because I haven't got time. And the other part of it was, um, I think, to do with the contact of them. So I, at that point, I was like, excuse my language, but fuck this. This is not something I need. But it had taken its toll on me really fast, and I'd ended up with a mass growth down in the region that these beings had worked on, funny enough. And it was huge. It was like size of a golf ball or so, a bit bigger. It was huge. Okay, so and it was in the region they had gone to, exactly on that right-hand side in my groin. And I was a very sick girl. I knew that something was wrong at that stage because these beings, I reckon, or my team that I work with now, had sent me a message just before that, during all this, and they'd shown me an image. I'd laid down the table, I'd done a massage for someone, but then I'd laid on the table and asked my husband just to help me let go energetically. And he'd only been there for like 1.5 minutes. It was so quick. I saw inside my body, and I saw the corpuscles. I saw the blood running through the whole body, and I saw one rogue cell, one black cell. I went, shit. So it's real then. Something's wrong. So I realized during that process that maybe these guys played a hand in something here. Didn't know what the something was. I was pretty angry. I'd had a gutful. This is not something I wanted, but obviously I agreed to it for a reason. And I still think it was a lot of stress. I was under a lot of stress. And I remember saying to myself one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd screamed it out to the universe, I ain't doing this. And I meant it. Miranda's very willful, so when she says something, it's fact. So, if it's a no from me or whatever it may be, I mean it. I'm very strong. And I said to them, what are we going to do about this? Get rid of it. Now, for those that don't know, I was also getting married around that time, so I had a lot going on because they told me I was going to die. That's basically, they just said to me, look, we're going to treat you. This is a long process, but we're not sure if it's going to work. We've got to be honest with you. And I was like, yeah, I'm not taking that. I was that person. I was like, no, I don't know if I believe that. So I was kind of in two minds. Going to go south, going to die, or not going to die. 50-50, let's just see where this goes. So by the time I'd had my screaming match and had a gutful and told the universe, excuse my language, go fuck, get fucked. I 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, because it took them a long time to diagnose me. It took me 2.5 months to get diagnosed fully because they couldn't figure out the hell it was. They knew it was a lymphoma, but they didn't know what it was, and they had to figure that out to make treatment. So they've got to fine-tune your treatment, right? So my information went all the way to Perth, Australia, and I'm in Queensland, so it went the other side of the country to some guy, some specialist guy, and he eventually diagnosed it. And so after all this, 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, after me saying no, and after these beings obviously doing some work on me as well, because they were in that area, that's the area they worked in, I was wondering what the heck they were doing down there. I went back to my doctor, who knew that I was about to have another treatment, because I used to have them every Friday, and said to me, your recent blood test just came back. I'd only had them about 3 days beforehand. And she said to me, poor thing, she said to me, you haven't got cancer. Your cancer's gone. And I knew, but I was like, oh, what? Really? She said, I can't explain it. She said, what have you been doing? And I said, nothing really. What are you going to say? You're going to say, by the way, aliens came, and she was like, I don't know what to do. Let's just do some more tests, poor thing. Let's do some more tests to make sure, in case we've missed something. So I allowed her to do that, and that was no problem. And I had a lot of pain at that time. I was still going through the pain of the cancer. It had gone through my nervous system and affected my nervous system. So I had a lot of nerve pain. I was under a lot of suffering at that time. For anyone that's had pain and suffering, they know what I'm talking about. It completely wrecks you. You literally lose your nature. You lose who you are because you're just suffering so bad. Well, I was in that stage. And so she said to me, look, the cancer's gone. We have no evidence of it. The growth they took out, they tested that. It was 100% positive for cancer, for T-cell lymphoma, no doubt about it. And we're not sure what to do with you now. She said, we might just monitor it for a while, and just in case it's a false positive. So they did that. And yeah, I went through the whole process. There's no cancer. So these beings, even though I was terrified and I'd gone through a lot of physical experience with them, they had done something. They had healed whatever it was that they found. They had healed. So the timeline they created was for what was coming. So for those that understand timelines, timelines can be changed in that aspect for you consciously if you will it. So they had gone and had done the work before I even knew what the hell was going to come and what was going to happen to me. They'd already preset the timeline so that when it arrived and I went through the process of cancer, that they had activated a timeline for my healing. So I had a miracle. And I know miracles are possible because I walked it. So that's what they did. I didn't realize till later that's what they did. They healed me as well. So for my act of giving, so my hybrid program contract of giving to them created them to come and heal me and create a miracle. So it took a lot for me to realize that. So I said, it's only been recently. It's only when, like I said, David said something, and I just was like, fuck, I never thought of that. And I had to think about it, and I realized, I looked back over those years and I realized, holy shit, that was them. My will as well, because my consciousness is strong. So my consciousness healed the problem So I released the consciousness of the connection of what I, at that time, had created. But they had already done the physical process, setting my body up for the healing. They were just waiting for me to get to the right mental and conscious place to heal it, to fully heal it, to get rid of all of it. So bless their hearts, for even though it was a hard experience, it was a grand result. So sometimes, and a lot of the times, that a lot of experiences we have are for the better. And even the ones that people have that are not so good, I have compassion for that because I myself felt the not so good for a period of time. And it messed me up a little bit because I didn't understand it. And no one I could speak to at that time could explain it to me. So I was on my own trying to figure this out. But I realise now, after 20 odd years, because I've been at this, what I've been doing for so long, I've realised now that they had a hand in it, I had a hand in it, and we'd made an agreement to, if I was willing to help them, they will come and help me. So that was the first stage of some of the experience I had. They're the more weird, uncomfortable, like shit feeling stages of extraterrestrial contact that I have. That was really early in my life. But from that day forward, a lot has changed, and that was the beginning of my awakening, truly was. They had worked on my psyche, they'd worked on my physical body, they'd done so much. I still went through a lot of emotional healing and trauma after my process. For those that don't know, I had to care for a husband who had a near-death experience, and then mine. So we had a good 10 or so years of a lot of stress, and it took its toll on me a little bit. So I had a lot to heal and a lot to get through. I was very angry because I was confused, I was exhausted, and I had all these experiences like this going on that I had no one to talk to about. So I had no one to explain who I was and why I was here, and why the hell am I having things off world come visit me. So that's the end of part one. I've got to go now because I'm going to be live with David Starr. So to talk about something else. So I will do part two shortly and give you the more amazing experiences, beautiful experiences, incredible experiences that I'm now having. I have seen physical UFOs, I've had visitations. I am still at this point, even just a week or something ago, I am having them come physically. I'm having them speak to me physically as well inside my body. So we will talk about that shortly, and this one you'll find very interesting because it's proof that this stuff is real and it really exists. So much love to you, and I'll talk to you shortly. Bye now.